The alien generals stood around the command table, surveying the battlefield projections with detached confidence. For them, this upcoming exercise was a formality. They had seen hundreds of training simulations like this one, and the result was always the same: another demonstration of the Coalition's superior military might. Their opponents today, the young Deathworlder cadets from Earth, were an oddity, certainly. A planet like Earth, classified as a death world due to its harsh environments and dangerous life forms, did produce resilient beings. Still, the generals saw the humans' raw resilience as nothing more than a curiosity. Deathworlder or not, one of the generals sneered. Their cadets are green. They've barely finished their basic training. They'll crumble under real military pressure. The others nodded in agreement. The Coalition's forces were the elite of the galaxy, honed through centuries of warfare and tested on countless worlds. The alien Coalition had dominated galactic battlefields with precision, overwhelming their enemies with superior tactics, discipline, and firepower. The human cadets might be tough, but toughness alone didn't win wars. The simulation, designed to last 3 days, would pit the Coalition's battle-hardened troops against the human cadets in a variety of combat scenarios. The goal was to give the Coalition soldiers experience fighting against Deathworlders and to show the humans the kind of military prowess they would have to follow if they were to fit into the galaxy's power structure. It wasn't just a test for the humans. It was a display of the Coalition's dominance. 3 days, another general muttered, is probably generous. I doubt they'll last that long. In contrast, the human cadets assembled at their own command posts, calm and composed. The briefing was short, far shorter than any of the alien officers could have imagined. There were no long-winded strategy discussions, no intricate battle plans. Just a single directive from their commanding officer. End it quickly. The cadets exchanged silent glances, their expressions unreadable. They knew the truth about their training and the expectations placed on them. Earth's brutal environment had shaped them into something far more dangerous than anyone outside their world could comprehend. The aliens thought they were walking into a standard training exercise. The humans, however, had other plans. Every one of the cadets had been handpicked for this mission, their training intensified beyond the typical rigors of military education. Earth's gravity, volatile climates, and constant threat of natural disasters had created a species that thrived on unpredictability. The human cadets were not just trained in combat, they had been raised in environments where survival meant thinking fast, adapting faster, and never relying on traditional methods. This simulation was a joke to them, and they knew it. We go in fast, one cadet said, her voice barely above a whisper. They won't know what hit them. Their confidence wasn't born of arrogance. They had studied the alien forces, learned their tactics, and knew their weaknesses. The Coalition's forces were slow to adapt, relying too heavily on overwhelming power and drawn-out engagements. They planned for 3 days, expecting a methodical, grinding battle. The humans had no intention of letting that happen. The Coalition generals, back in their control room, weren't worried. They watched the humans prepare through the surveillance feeds, noting the efficiency in how they moved, but still dismissing them. To the Coalition, humans were just another species, unique in their toughness but lacking in any real sophistication. The generals had seen it before. Time and time again, species that had evolved on harsh worlds believed their natural resilience would carry them through, only to fall short when faced with the organized, relentless might of a true galactic force. Let them try their little tricks, one of the senior generals said, leaning back in his chair. Our forces will grind them down. They'll have no choice but to retreat and dig in. We'll break them slowly. It was an assumption based on experience. Every opponent they'd faced before had eventually broken under the strain of prolonged, relentless combat. The humans might surprise them with early aggressiveness, but they were sure the cadets would tire, that their strategies would fail in the face of the Coalition's discipline and numbers. But what the aliens failed to realize was that humans never fought the same way twice. Their training emphasized creativity, adaptability, and the ability to turn chaos into opportunity. The human cadets weren't going to fight a traditional battle. They weren't going to fight a battle that the Coalition could predict at all. The simulation was set to begin, and the human cadets stood at the ready, waiting for the signal. They didn't need a long briefing or a complicated plan. They knew exactly what to do. The moment the simulation started, they would move, fast and without hesitation. The alien coalition had built its strategy around endurance, expecting the humans to fall into a predictable rhythm of defense and slow retreat. But the human strategy was simple: destroy their enemy before they even realized what was happening. The aliens believed they were about to showcase their dominance in front of their newest galactic allies, to demonstrate why their military was feared across star systems. The humans knew differently. They had trained for this, anticipated every move the coalition forces would make, and were ready to exploit every gap in their rigid strategy. The aliens were preparing for a 3-day battle, and that very belief was their first mistake. Remember, their commanding officer had said before they headed to their positions, 15 minutes. That's all it should take. The cadets had laughed quietly among themselves at that. 15 minutes to dismantle a force that expected to stretch the battle across days. It was ambitious, but they were trained for it, ready to take advantage of the coalition's arrogance. The cadets knew their strengths, understood the terrain, and had a playbook filled with tactics the aliens had never seen. As the countdown to the start of the simulation ticked away, the alien generals remained smug, utterly confident in the superiority of their forces. They had been fighting wars for generations, honing their skills and refining their tactics. To them, the humans were upstarts, a species that had yet to truly prove themselves on the galactic stage. They expected to grind them down, to show the Deathworlders what a real military force looked like. But the humans had no intention of fighting on the aliens' terms. The seconds ticked down, and the human cadets prepared to execute their plan. Their eyes were focused, their minds sharp. The battle would not take 3 days. It wouldn't take even 1. The coalition's forces had prepared for a protracted fight, but the humans weren't interested in that. They had come to win, and they knew how to do it, fast and with devastating precision. As the final second ticked away, the human cadets were ready. The aliens had no idea what was coming. The simulation began, and within moments, the difference in strategy was clear. The alien forces deployed in perfect formation, spreading out across the battlefield with the precision that had won them countless engagements before. They moved slowly, methodically, advancing in calculated steps designed to wear down their enemies over the next 3 days. The generals observed with quiet satisfaction. This was how they had always won, through persistence, patience, and overwhelming force. But the humans didn't play by those rules. As the alien forces marched forward, anticipating a drawn-out engagement, the human cadets were already on the move. No hesitation, no waiting for the enemy to fully deploy. They struck immediately. Using the natural cover of the terrain and their intimate knowledge of tactics designed for speed and efficiency, the cadets executed a flanking maneuver so fast that the aliens were caught completely off guard. What the generals had expected to be a slow advance was shattered before it even began. The first sign of trouble came when one of the alien battalions, tasked with securing a forward position, suddenly went silent. Reports of heavy resistance came through, confusing the commanders. Heavy resistance? How could there be? The humans were supposed to be on the defensive, retreating to their fallback points, not attacking so aggressively. Impossible, one general muttered, staring at the map. They're supposed to dig in, not launch a full-scale attack. But that was exactly what the human cadets had done. They hadn't bothered with defense. They had no intention of dragging this out for days. Their training had taught them to strike hard and fast, exploiting every weakness before the enemy had a chance to adapt. And that's exactly what they were doing. In the first 5 minutes, the human cadets had already breached the alien front lines. They moved with the kind of precision and ruthlessness that the aliens had never encountered before. Alien squads that had been trained to hold positions for hours found themselves overwhelmed in mere seconds, their defensive formations broken before they could react. The alien commanders scrambled to issue new orders. They had expected a slow, grinding war of attrition, not this lightning-fast assault that was tearing through their ranks. The simulation was supposed to last for 3 days, with the aliens gradually wearing down the human defenses, not the other way around. But the humans weren't waiting to be worn down. They were dismantling the alien strategy piece by piece, moving so quickly that the coalition forces could barely respond. The alien soldiers, trained in methodical warfare, found themselves outmatched by the humans' relentless aggression. Communication lines broke down as human cadets targeted key command centers, cutting off the alien forces from their leaders and leaving them disorganized. Reports flooded into the alien command center, each one more troubling than the last. Entire platoons had been neutralized within minutes, and key positions were falling like dominoes. The alien generals exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to respond to an enemy that didn't follow the script. "Send reinforcements," one of the commanders barked, but it was already too late. Every time they tried to regroup, the humans were there, anticipating their moves and striking before the aliens could recover. The speed of the human assault was unlike anything the coalition had ever faced. Their forces, used to long engagements, were ill-equipped to deal with the sheer velocity at which the humans operated. The humans didn't give the alien forces time to think. Every time the aliens tried to establish a defensive line, the humans would strike from a different angle, disrupting their formations and scattering their troops. What the alien generals had dismissed as human inexperience was now being revealed as something far more dangerous: adaptability. The coalition forces had relied on their traditional tactics for so long that they hadn't considered what would happen if their enemy didn't play along. And now they were paying for it. The human cadets were exploiting every weakness in the alien strategy, turning the battlefield into a chaotic nightmare for the coalition forces. Within the first 10 minutes, the human cadets had seized key control points that were supposed to take hours to reach. The alien generals could only watch in stunned silence as their elite soldiers, the pride of the coalition, were systematically dismantled by a group of human cadets barely out of training. The humans weren't just holding their own, they were dominating the battlefield in ways the aliens had never anticipated. Panic began to spread among the alien ranks. Their carefully crafted battle plan had been thrown out the window, replaced by a desperate scramble to hold on to what little ground they had left. The humans had seized the initiative, and the aliens were left trying to catch up, their forces scattered and confused. Every time the alien commanders issued new orders, the humans were already ahead of them. The cadets had hacked into the coalition's communication network, jamming their signals and feeding false information to disrupt their chain of command. What should have been a well-coordinated counteroffensive turned into chaos as alien forces were sent to defend positions that had already fallen. "How are they moving so fast?" one general muttered, his eyes fixed on the rapidly shifting battlefield map. It made no sense. The humans weren't supposed to be capable of this kind of tactical superiority. They were supposed to be raw recruits, unfamiliar with galactic warfare. But the speed at which they were adapting to the situation was unlike anything the coalition had prepared for. In truth, the alien commanders had fallen into the same trap that many species had before them: they underestimated the humans. They had seen Earth's classification as a death world as a quirk, not as a warning. They had assumed that humanity's ability to survive harsh environments didn't translate into military prowess. They were wrong. The human cadets didn't rely on brute force or numbers. They fought with precision, striking at the exact points where the coalition forces were weakest. The coalition's reliance on rigid battle formations and carefully planned strategies was their undoing. The humans had learned to thrive in chaos, to adapt on the fly and exploit opportunities as they appeared. And now, they were using that to their advantage. The alien generals tried to rally their forces, but the human cadets were relentless. They didn't give the aliens time to regroup, pressing their advantage with every passing minute. It was a kind of warfare the aliens weren't used to: fast, chaotic, and utterly devastating. The human cadets pushed deeper into the alien lines, bypassing heavily defended areas and targeting the coalition's command centers. In a matter of minutes, the aliens' ability to coordinate their forces was crippled. Commanders were cut off from their troops, and entire divisions were left leaderless and vulnerable. The coalition generals, watching from their control room, could hardly believe what they were seeing. Their elite forces, their meticulously planned strategy, was being torn apart by a group of human cadets who had been expected to struggle. What was supposed to be a long, grinding battle had turned into a rout. 3 days? One of the human cadets had quipped to another, back at the start of the simulation. It'll be over in 15 minutes. And it was looking like they were right. As the simulation approached the 15-minute mark, the alien forces were in full retreat. Their soldiers, trained for long, drawn-out engagements, were overwhelmed by the speed and aggression of the human attack. The battlefield, which should have been a carefully controlled exercise, was now a chaotic mess, with alien troops scrambling to find cover and avoid the relentless human assault. The alien generals, once so confident in their strategy, were left watching helplessly as their forces crumbled before their eyes. The Deathworlder cadets had done the impossible. They had turned a 3-day battle into a 15-minute slaughter. The situation was unraveling faster than any of the alien generals had thought possible. Just minutes into the battle, their forces were in disarray. Their formations, meant to grind down the opposition over days, had collapsed under the relentless human assault. What was once a carefully calculated strategy had devolved into chaos as the human cadets systematically dismantled their defenses. The coalition's troops, who had expected to engage in a prolonged battle, found themselves utterly unprepared for the speed and ferocity of the humans' attacks. The human cadets moved like phantoms, striking key positions before the aliens even realized they were under assault. Entire squads vanished from the battlefield as human forces swept through them with an efficiency that left no room for recovery. At one of the coalition's forward command posts, alien officers scrambled to reorganize their troops, but it was no use. Every time they tried to regroup, the human cadets hit another critical point, throwing their efforts into disarray. Communication between the command centers and the front lines had all but collapsed, leaving the alien forces scattered and leaderless. "We've lost contact with the eastern flank," one officer reported, his voice edged with panic. "And the western lines aren't responding either. They're picking us off one by one." The general stood in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what was happening. How had this gone so wrong so quickly? These were cadets, raw recruits. They should have been struggling to hold their ground, not dismantling the coalition's elite forces in minutes. But it wasn't just about brute strength, or overwhelming numbers. The human cadets had been trained to think in ways the coalition forces couldn't anticipate. The coalition's entire strategy was based on a rigid structure, built around methodical advances and slow attrition. The humans, however, were trained in flexibility, speed, and unpredictability, qualities that were proving to be devastating in the current battle. The alien generals began issuing desperate orders, trying to pull their forces back, regroup, and mount some kind of defense. But the humans didn't give them the chance. Every time the alien troops attempted to form a defensive line, the humans would bypass them entirely, striking from unexpected angles. It was as if the human cadets knew exactly where the coalition's weak points were, and they exploited them with terrifying precision. "They're hitting us faster than we can react," one of the officers said, his hands trembling as he reviewed the tactical displays. "We can't hold them off at this pace." And he was right. The humans weren't just attacking, they were dismantling the coalition forces from the inside out. The cadets had identified key positions early in the battle and focused their efforts on disrupting the aliens' ability to coordinate. Without their central command structure, the coalition forces were blind, stumbling around the battlefield, while the human cadets methodically took them apart. The human strategy was simple: keep the pressure on, don't let the enemy breathe, and move faster than they could react. Every time the aliens tried to regroup, they found themselves under assault from a different direction. The humans were relentless, striking with precision and withdrawing before the aliens could respond. It was a devastating form of warfare, one that the coalition forces had no answer for. "How are they doing this?" one general growled, staring at the map as red icons, representing their own forces, blinked out one after the other. "This isn't a battle. It's a massacre." Indeed, the battlefield was littered with signs of the coalition's defeat. Strategic positions that should have held for hours were overrun in minutes. Alien forces, trained for long engagements, found themselves completely overwhelmed by the humans' lightning-fast maneuvers. Their usual tactics, slow, methodical advances, were useless against an enemy that refused to fight by their rules. The alien generals, watching the collapse of their forces, were stunned into silence. This wasn't supposed to happen. Their troops had trained for years, mastered tactics that had won battles across dozens of worlds. But none of that seemed to matter now. The human cadets were showing a level of tactical brilliance that had completely blindsided the coalition. Back on the battlefield, the human cadets pressed their advantage. They moved with purpose, hitting the coalition's supply lines, disabling key defensive infrastructure, and cutting off reinforcements before they could reach the front lines. The aliens, already thrown into chaos, were now facing logistical collapse. Their troops, cut off from support and supplies, were fighting a losing battle. As the humans tightened the noose around the remaining coalition forces, panic set in. Alien soldiers who had been so confident at the start of the simulation were now running for cover, abandoning their positions as the humans closed in. It was a rout, pure and simple. "Their command centers have fallen," one human cadet reported, a hint of disbelief in her voice as she observed the crumbling alien forces. "They have no coordination left. It's over." And it was. The coalition's entire strategy had been built on the assumption that the humans would play by the same rules, that they would engage in a drawn-out battle where attrition would slowly wear them down. But the humans had flipped the script, turning the battlefield into a game of speed, adaptation, and unpredictability, one the coalition forces simply couldn't keep up with. Back in the alien command center, the generals were grappling with the reality of their defeat. Their forces were in disarray, and there was no saving them now. The humans had won, and they had done it in a way that no one had anticipated. What should have been a 3-day battle had been reduced to less than 15 minutes of total devastation. "This can't be happening," one of the generals whispered, his face pale. "We planned for every possibility." "Clearly not every possibility," another general muttered darkly, watching as the last of their forward positions fell to the human cadets. "We underestimated them." And that was the truth of it. The coalition had underestimated the humans from the start. They had seen them as tough, resilient, but ultimately unsophisticated. They hadn't realized that the humans' ability to adapt, to think on their feet, would give them the upper hand in a battle like this. As the last of the alien forces collapsed, the human cadets regrouped, having achieved total victory in record time. They had executed their strategy flawlessly, using speed, surprise, and precision to outmaneuver and outthink the coalition's elite forces. The alien generals, once so sure of their superiority, were now left stunned, unable to comprehend how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The battlefield, which should have been a testament to the coalition's strength, was now a graveyard of their defeat. The human cadets had proven that they were not just resilient survivors, they were tacticians, warriors, and strategists capable of winning a battle in a fraction of the time it would take anyone else. For the first time, the coalition generals understood what it truly meant to face a Deathworlder. The aftermath of the battle was undeniable. The alien generals stood in their observation room, watching the final moments of their forces collapse. The battlefield, which had been meticulously planned to last for 3 grueling days, was now silent. The coalition's troops, once the pride of their militaries, were routed, scattered, and decimated. What should have been a long, drawn-out engagement had turned into a swift, brutal lesson in what it meant to underestimate humanity. The human cadets, having completed their mission in record time, moved with precision as they secured the final objectives. There was no celebration, no unnecessary commentary. To them, this was just another exercise, another mission carried out with clinical efficiency. They had been told to end the battle quickly, and they had. The entire engagement had taken no more than 15 minutes. What was meant to be a demonstration of coalition power had become a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. The alien generals, still processing what had just happened, could only stare in disbelief at the battlefield reports. It wasn't just the speed at which the humans had moved that shocked them, it was the way they had dismantled the coalition's tactics. The humans had taken every advantage the aliens thought they had and turned it against them. Every step of the coalition's plan had been anticipated, countered, and exploited. How did this happen? One of the generals muttered, still staring at the tactical map, where red markers representing their forces had disappeared at an alarming rate. How did they know? They didn't fight like any species we've encountered. Another general responded, shaking his head in disbelief. They didn't follow any of the patterns we've trained for. That was the core of it. The coalition had spent decades perfecting their battle strategies, creating systems that had worked against countless opponents. But humanity hadn't followed the script. They hadn't behaved like the other species the coalition had faced. Instead of engaging in a slow, methodical war, they had turned the battlefield into a chaotic storm, one where speed and adaptability were the most valuable assets. The generals exchanged glances, their confidence eroded. This wasn't just about one battle, one simulation. The humans had exposed a weakness in the coalition's approach to warfare. They had shown that a rigid, predictable strategy could be torn apart by a species that thrived in chaos. And that realization terrified them. Back on the battlefield, the human cadets regrouped, calm and collected. There was no need for debriefing. They knew exactly what they had done and why it had worked. Their commanding officer had told them to end it quickly, and they had followed that order to the letter. They had exploited every advantage struck at the heart of the coalition's defenses, and left no room for the enemy to recover. One of the cadets glanced back toward the observation room, where the alien generals were no doubt watching in shock. Do you think they're going to rethink their strategies after this? She asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. They'll have to, another cadet replied. If they don't, the next time won't end so cleanly for them. It was true. The aliens had been fortunate that this was only a simulation. In a real battle, the results would have been catastrophic. Their forces would have been decimated, their entire command structure shattered. And it would have taken less than half an hour for the humans to claim victory. The alien generals finally regained their composure, though the air of superiority they had carried before the battle was gone. One by one, they turned to the lead general, awaiting some kind of explanation, some rationale for what had just happened. But there were no excuses to be made. The humans had outmaneuvered them, outthought them, and won in a way that no one had anticipated. We need to reassess our approach to them, the lead general finally said, his voice tight with frustration. Clearly, we've underestimated them. This isn't a simple matter of physical endurance or resilience. They've mastered something far more dangerous, adaptation. The other generals nodded, though the bitterness of the admission was clear on their faces. The humans had proven themselves to be more than just tough. They were strategists, capable of thinking on their feet and exploiting the weaknesses of any rigid system. The coalition's entire military doctrine had been based on a slow, methodical approach to warfare. But the humans had shown that speed, flexibility, and unpredictability could turn even the best-laid plans into ruins. I've never seen anything like it, one of the younger generals said quietly. They don't fight like we do. They're relentless, another general finished for him. They don't stop. They don't give you time to recover. The room fell silent as the full weight of that statement settled in. The coalition forces had never faced an opponent that fought this way. In previous conflicts, even the most dangerous enemies had followed predictable patterns. But humans? They didn't play by those rules. They fought to win, and they did it in the most efficient way possible, regardless of how unconventional it seemed. For a moment, none of the generals spoke. The humiliation of the defeat was still fresh, and the reality of what it meant for future engagements was beginning to sink in. The humans were not just another species to be molded into the coalition's way of fighting. They were something else entirely, something that the coalition wasn't prepared for. We'll need to revise our tactics, the lead general said, breaking the silence. Not just for humans, but for any future encounters. If they can fight like this, others may adapt in similar ways. The other generals murmured in agreement, though it was clear that the thought of changing their long-established strategies was difficult to accept. For years, the coalition had relied on its methodical approach to warfare, confident that it was the most effective way to win. But the humans had shattered that confidence in a matter of minutes. "They won't be able to repeat this," one of the older generals said, trying to salvage some pride. "Once we know how they fight, we'll be prepared next time." But even as he spoke, it was clear that not everyone in the room believed him. The humans had won, not because of a one-time trick, but because their entire approach to warfare was different. They hadn't relied on overwhelming force or superior technology. They had relied on creativity, adaptability, and speed, things that couldn't be countered with simple preparations. The simulation ended, the battlefield now quiet. The human cadets, having achieved their objective, were already preparing to move on to their next assignment. For them, this wasn't a victory worth boasting about, it was simply what they had trained for. But for the alien generals, the implications were far more profound. This defeat would resonate throughout the coalition. Questions would be asked, and strategies would have to be rethought. The galaxy had seen what humans could do, and it was clear that they were not a species to be taken lightly. As the alien generals left the observation room, one thought lingered in their minds: if human cadets could do this, what would happen when they faced experienced human soldiers in a real war? For the first time, the coalition realized that the galaxy's newest members might just be its most dangerous.